Thank you very much for that. And Andrew, I think you're up for our next talk on R for atom probe tomography.
Okay, so just want to give a brief introduction on this first. What kind of motivating why we were using R to develop this package. So R is an open source kind of language that is really used by the data analysis and statistics community, and provides a wide variety of packages and modules to perform particular analyses. It's really been developed in order to have kind of rapid data analysis and visualization techniques, including things like interactive plots, 3D plots, et cetera. And all those packages are maintained by subject matter experts. And so it means that the burden of getting those analyses and maintaining those analyses and ensuring that they're correct is distributed throughout a wide community. So we developed our particular package to kind of add APT analysis functionality using R and take advantage of all these packages to make an easily extensible open source analysis suite. Now, I will admit right up front that we're continuing to work on this, so it's very much in its alpha stages. Things work, but are continually being added and tweaked in order to extend the functionality of individual routines or add new routines. So far, we have features that a lot of people have shown so far, like correlation histograms, detector analysis, mass spectral fitting, and kind of the main focus that I'm going to talk about today is leveraging the formal spatial statistical tests that we can use on three-dimensional data to do things like cluster detection and characterization. So kind of the resources that we use to build this are R, which is available kind of online very easily, this GitHub repository that I linked to here, and then for my personal use as kind of just a helper thing is this IDE called RStudio, which is kind of the de facto standard for the R community in terms of development. I will be sharing kind of code snippets embedded on the pages. For the most part, those are complete. Once we get into kind of the machine learning process, I've just highlighted the kind of main workhorse functions there because the full code would be too much to include on a slide here. So the first thing we need to do to use this package is have our APT files. So here's some examples of basically we can load in just by pointing to that file. We can edit that range file so we have more custom names that kind of differentiate the charge states or particular isotopes in that range. We can do kind of the basic things like plotting out our mass spectrum in kind of a very easy way, utilizing a package that's designed for mass spectral analysis. So it has a number of built-in peak finding algorithms, background correction, et cetera, that once again are really specific to the mass spec community and are maintained by them. So once again, leveraging that development. We can then take those mass spectra, generate these correlation histograms very easily, and even look at higher indices by basically taking the multiple hit data that exists and looking directly at what those hits are, and look at kind of higher dimensional spaces than we could plot in this kind of 2D correlation histogram. We can also look at kind of the detector space that's available and look at things like charge state ratios. Once again, we've kind of adjusted that range file slightly to mark which peaks are in which charge state, so we can look at how those things vary over detector space or in three-dimensional space as well. And that's kind of where we're really focused our development, is working on analysis techniques for three-dimensional space. So here's kind of a basic, this same data set where we can just visualize what these different types of molecules look like and where they reside in space. The analysis that we're going to be doing is really leveraging this SPATStat package, which is developed by the experts within the spatial statistics community to enable all kinds of statistically rigorous analysis routines in kind of spatial point pattern data, which is what we have in AtomProbe. So to walk through an example of this, I'm going to be looking at this kind of cluster data set, which are kind of alloy molecules within an aluminum alloy, and kind of try to characterize these clusters using these spatial statistics methods. So we can load in this data, plot this data, kind of all through a few lines of calls here, and then start looking at what the kind of aggregate properties are of this data set when we're looking for clusters and trying to figure out what is actually going on. So I'll briefly breeze through in spatial statistics. If we have clustering, there are a number of statistical functions that we can do to summarize what's going on here. This is one in particular. I'm not going to go into it, but essentially we can look, test for clustering, and extract features from this function that we can then feed into a machine learning program, and that can tell us information about what those clusters actually look like. This work is in a paper that we submitted, and if you're interested in that manuscript, I'd be happy to pass that along offline here. But when we do this, we get kind of results that allow us to estimate the radius of those clusters, the density of those clusters, and kind of the background density of those clustering type points. We can estimate the errors on this based upon kind of our training and test data. So we know that when we state a figure, what our level of confidence is in that figure. Similarly, with that information, we can then do prediction on our observed data, where we simulate a pattern that uses all these parameters that we've tested in our trained machine learning algorithm, and do prediction and compare that with the spatial statistics function. So if we compare that simulated data with our original observed atom probe data, we can see that for the most part, we match the distribution of those points, and that gives us a pretty good idea of where those things are sitting. So all of this basically lets us kind of characterize aggregate properties of clustering and identify those features. So I'll just kind of summarize here is you can look at this package. You can find more tutorials and examples of other things you can do, including interactive plots at this website here. If you're interested more about spatial statistics, this is a really useful reference that is developed to be used in R, and some other R references here. Feel free to follow up via email, because I know these are going to be archived. The email listed there is not my own, but our group leader, who will kind of be a more permanent email address. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Just remember to raise your questions, like audience, if we have some. So I guess the machine learning is not something that's really been explored very much in our community. There's been a couple of small shots at it. What do you think are the sort of key areas in machine learning that we need to be focusing on to improve things like clustering analysis?
Yeah, so I think we really need to be taking advantage of all the data that exists in our atom probe data sets. So far, we've kind of been segmented into either mass spectral processing or spatial data processing or multiple hit processing. And I think there's a really rich data environment that allows us to combine those elements together and discover kind of these higher order correlations between all these different things. And that's kind of what we're starting to do here with this clustering analysis set, where we have much more formal and rigorous tools to test for clustering. And then the next level of this, instead of using a range file, which is what we did now to kind of convert these continuous marks of mass spectral, charge to mass ratio into particular identified species, is these data analysis tools actually can take advantage of the raw mass to charge ratio associated with each point, and then leverage that to do better kind of spatial segregation of peak overlaps using their spatial position, and starting to be able to get better identifications there. And really, one of our long-term goals is being able to not only look for clusters, but really identify and have a classifier of morphology in these systems, where we can take a data set and say, okay, are we actually getting precipitate type information, or we have something more like a bicontinuous network? Our group really focuses on kind of small molecule organic systems, which have pretty different characteristics and kind of features of interest compared to a lot of the atom probe community. And so I'm really keen on getting feedback from this group and more broadly from the community about what features are really valuable to extend these analyses in a way that is broadly applicable.
That's great. I'm just going to jump in and say thank you very much for that. I'm very much looking forward to having a look through your online tutorials later.